Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Friends and relatives are remembering two important men who elevated Native representation on the national level. Ben Nighthorse Campbell and Harvey Pratt walked on within a day of each other. Both had a significant influence on policy and advocacy for Native Americans. Campbell in Congress and Pratt in the arts and law enforcement. We'll hear today from some of those who knew them about their accomplishments and how they will be remembered. We're back after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. Last November, a stranded humpback whale near Yachats had to be euthanized after rescue efforts to put the 10-ton, 28-foot-long mammal back into the ocean failed. As Brian Bull of Buffalo's Fire reports, what followed became a meaningful collaboration between the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians and a team from Oregon State University.
In mid-November, volunteers worked around the clock to keep the whale doused in seawater and to try pulling it back into the sea. Video from the Oregonian captured some of those harried efforts. Finally, on-site stranding experts and veterinarians agreed to put the whale down. A necropsy team from OSU prepared to remove samples to determine how the whale lived before getting tangled in crab pot line. Kurt Williams is the director of the Oregon Veterinary Diagnostic Lab.
I've never done a necropsy exam on a whale before. I don't think I'll have another opportunity. I hope I don't have another opportunity because I don't want this to happen to these animals.
Another group of roughly 20 Siletz tribal members also came. Among them was Lisa Norton, Chief Administrative Officer for the tribe. She said they began by laying down tobacco and praying with Williams' team.
We offer up prayers for the animal and the bounty it's going to give us. People kind of did their own thing. They prayed in whatever way was comfortable for them, but we just spent some time taking in the enormity of the task.
There's been a historic tension between tribes and scholars, often due to academic institutions pillaging remains and artifacts from native burial mounds and village sites. But these two groups, standing side by side with the whale, worked in tandem, conferring with each other as they worked against the incoming tide and pending sunset. Again, Lisa Norton and Kurt Williams.
We were able to get them to get more specimens than they would have otherwise. And that resulted in them finishing quicker and getting more samples had they just done it on their own, but also allowed us to preserve more parts of the whale for future use.
Being able to work alongside the members of the Siletz tribe was amazing.
The Siletz have stored 1,500 pounds of blubber for possible soap or oil, while the whale's skeleton has been buried for possible use later as a museum piece. While the whale's death was a sad event for many, the collaboration between the tribe and university gave a primer for how to handle similar incidents in the future. Angela Sandana is the Natural Resources Director for the Siletz.
We would anticipate that if something similar happened, that we would revive those relationships and collaborations that we've built from this experience.
For National Native News, I'm Brian Bull.
The Indian Health Service, or IHS, recently announced 7 projects to build or renovate healthcare facilities, often in rural areas throughout Indian country. As KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrazio reports, one of those beneficiaries will be Arizona's Auction Indian community.
The tribe's chairman, Gabriel Lopez, is grateful.
Currently, we have a satellite facility, which is 2,000 square feet. It's a triple wide trailer with minimal services.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. met with the Auction Indian community in November. After that visit, he made a social media post with Lopez.
The elders in the community have to drive 60 to 80 miles to get decent care, and they have to go through Maricopa County with all the traffic, so it's an inconvenience, and it can be a lethal inconvenience.
Auction will construct a 60,000 square foot facility and lease it at no cost to IHS for 2 decades. In exchange, the agency will lobby Congress on behalf of the tribe for federal funding to staff and maintain the building.
In a roundabout way, we're looking at maybe about 2 years to be up and running.
I'm Gabriel Pietrazio.
And I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation, with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support for law and justice-related programming provided by Hobbs, Strauss, Dean & Walker, LLP, a national law firm dedicated to promoting and defending tribal rights for over 40 years. More information available at hobbsstrauss.com.
Tribal Development Partners, helping tribes build toward their goals through 105L leasing and essential facility development, empowering sovereignty, strengthening community. More at tribaldevpartners.com, proud supporters of this show.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Tribal leaders, members of Congress, and many others are paying tribute to Northern Cheyenne citizen Ben Nighthorse Campbell, who died on December 30th. The Northern Cheyenne tribe declared a tribal holiday to honor his legacy. Among other accomplishments, he was a U.S. representative and senator, one of the few Native Americans to serve in Congress. He championed pivotal legislation, including the Indian Gaming Act and the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. A day after Campbell's death, Cheyenne and Arapaho peace chief and acclaimed artist Harvey Pratt also walked on. Among his many accomplishments, he designed the National Native American Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. He also spent decades working in law enforcement. Today on our show, we're looking back at the lives and legacies of both men and their advancement of Native causes. Joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Suzanne Schoen-Harjo. She is the president of the Morning Star Institute and a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. She is Cheyenne and Odolgi Muskogee. Suzanne, hello, and welcome back to Native America Calling.
Hi, Sean. Thank you.
Joining us from Durango, Colorado is Shannon Campbell. She is the founder and CEO of Sorrel Sky Galleries and the daughter of Ben Nighthorse Campbell. Shannon, good morning and welcome to Native America Calling.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Joining us from El Reno, Oklahoma is Gina Posey Pratt. She is the wife of Harvey Pratt. She is Muskogee and Yuchi. Gina, hello to you and welcome to Native America Calling.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. Also joining us from El Reno is Nathan Pratt. He is an artist and he is Cheyenne and Arapaho and Sioux. He is the son of Harvey Pratt. Nathan, hello and welcome to the show. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
And joining us on Zoom from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, we have Dee Cordry. He is a former Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation agent and the author of Children of White Thunder. Dee, hello and welcome to Native America Calling.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, we have a lot of guests on the show, and we're going to talk about two very high-profile Native American men. Suzanne, I want to begin with you. Ben Nighthorse Campbell, of course, we're going to lead off with, and later we'll talk about Harvey Pratt. Senator Campbell, you worked closely with on many key pieces of legislation on Native issues. How would you describe your working relationship and his brand of politics?
I want to begin, if I might, by talking about the things that unite Harvey Pratt and Ben Nighthorse Campbell. Of course, they're both artists and they're both veterans and both had seats on the Council of Cheyenne Chiefs for one for the North and one for the South. And they knew each other. They both had very prominent ties to the National Museum of the American Indian. Ben is a sponsor of legislation for it and one of our champions. And Harvey Pratt as someone who prayed for it all the time and who ended up winning the contest to do the Veterans Memorial, which is a magnificent symbol of the longevity of our Native warriors and their place in society. Both also had important ties to one of the most important things that has happened in recent history, although 1864 might not seem so recent to some. The Sand Creek Massacre. Harvey Pratt had ancestors, one who survived Sand Creek and another who was a witness and wrote about it, and whose testimony was accepted in all of the military and congressional records of the investigation into the Colorado Volunteers and the Army's behaviors and heinous activities and results at Sand Creek. And Ben Nighthorse Campbell was the lead sponsor on both laws that led to the recognition in law of the site, the mapped site of the Sand Creek Massacre itself using non-destructive ground-penetrating radar, and also the follow-up legislation that declared it a national memorial and monument, and it clarified that definitely it was a massacre and not, as it had been known for some years in Colorado, as a battle, that it was nothing of the kind. So they had deep, deep ties to each other and similar arcs, if not in timing, in kind. And with Ben Nighthorse Campbell, Harvey Pratt and I had the same hometown, El Reno, but we did not know each other growing up. At least I don't think we did. And when you're growing up, 4 years is a huge difference. and so we didn't go to school together or anything like that. But
you got connected later. Tell me
later.
Yeah.
And
but you
then, I didn't know him when he was a youngster growing up in California, or any of his young life. But I did meet him as an artist, as a friend of a distant relative of mine, Kelly Haney, Enoch Kelly Haney, Seminole and Muskogee artist, whose statue tops the Oklahoma State Capitol. And then later, as he became a member of as he was voted into the House and then later into the Senate. And we were really close confidants and friends throughout his period on the Hill, where he was one of the busiest people ever. I noticed in an obituary that he was referred to as having a scant legislative record, which I'm sure would have made him laugh, because he was busy all the time and did amazing things. I mean, just to have sponsored the National Museum of the American Indian and the repatriation laws as original sponsors of those would have been monumental enough and something that you couldn't call scant. But doing the Sand Creek laws and weighing in on the legislation to create a memorial for the Indian soldiers, the Indian fallen at the Battle of Little Bighorn, and to provide for a new name for it to be the Little Bighorn National Battlefield Monument rather than the Custer Battlefield, because as Ben used to say, it was the only battlefield in the U.S. system to be named after an individual, and of course the only one to be named after the loser of the battle. So he was instrumental in that, in backing bills championed by Pat Williams of Montana, and he was with Senator Kyle from Arizona. They were the lead sponsors of the important amendment in 1990 to the Indian Arts and Crafts Act of 1936, I think it was, and that upped the penalties for impersonating a native and a native artist, and strengthened the purposes of that act, which was begun by Friends of Native Peoples in the Southwest, a great artist and legal coalition with Georgia O'Keeffe and D.H. Lawrence and all sorts of amazing people. John Collier, who later became the Commissioner of Indian Affairs during the New Deal administration of Franklin Roosevelt, when a lot of when the Arts and Crafts Act got its start. So Ben had a rich record, and the Animus La Plata bill for the Ute tribe and for that part of Colorado. He did lots and lots of work for the state of Colorado, and it was a great supporter and sponsor of legislation to end the formerly vile name of, or the vile former name of the Washington football team. And his legislation was pretty simple and had a companion bill introduced on the same day by Delegate Falioma Vega and John Lewis that would have said that they couldn't lease the RFK Stadium if they continued to have a name that just commented on the appearance of people. Anyway, that's not even a tenth of what
just scraping, just the tip of the iceberg. Suzanne, thank you so much for kicking off our conversation here today and giving us that wonderful overview of both the careers of Ben Nighthorse Campbell and Harvey Pratt. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back and continue our conversation with our guests. The next major elections are still 10 months away, but Native American voting rights advocates are sounding the alarm over barriers from redistricting, mail-in ballot changes, and other obstacles. We'll hear about legal victories and setbacks and the work to offset ongoing confusion over the upcoming vote. That's on the next Native America Calling.
Repatriation is the return of ancestors and stolen culture. The Association on American Indian Affairs is hosting the 11th annual Repatriation Conference, Feeding the Fire, Advancing the Movement, in February 2026. This fully virtual conference will offer small group interactive workshops, strategies, networking, and more to advance domestic and international repatriation. More at Indian-Affairs.org. The association supports this show.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. We are remembering the career of the late Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell. Later, we will also look back at the impressive life of artist and forensic investigator Harvey Pratt. Leave a comment on this show. You can go to our website, nativeamericacalling.com, or any of our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. Again, engage with us here at Native America Calling. Let's now talk with Shannon Campbell, the daughter of Ben Nighthorse Campbell. And Shannon, we listened to Suzanne earlier before the break give us that overview of your father's life, a lot of his political accomplishments. But outside of politics, he was an Air Force veteran. He was an Olympian in the sport of judo, later an accomplished jeweler. How did he approach all of these different pursuits?
That's a great question. And I think Suzanne did such an incredible job listing so many of Dad's accomplishments. I had written my dad's obituary and just read it. It was in today's paper, and I thought, oh my gosh, I forgot to add this and I forgot to add that. And there's just so many like lifetimes in one person's life that I feel like my dad accomplished. And I think like the major story really is the poverty and the trauma that he came from in his foundation, with his mom having tuberculosis, and she she couldn't care for my dad most of his childhood. So he spent over half of his early years until he was 7 or 8 years old in an orphanage. And that experience really haunted him and followed him through his whole life. And I think he was really reacting to those early years. And what we saw from that is just this extreme overachiever and kind of a fighting instinct for the underdog, and for people that needed and need somebody advocating for them. And I think because as a child, he didn't have anybody advocating for him. We just really saw that in his lifetime.
Shannon, another one of your father's notable roles was serving on the Council of Chiefs for the Northern Cheyenne tribe. And it's interesting because he did not reconnect with his tribe until later in life. How did he foster that connection? I know he's very beloved on the Northern Cheyenne Indian Reservation.
Yeah, well, in his early years, it wasn't popular to be Native American. And if you could pass for being non-Native, you certainly wanted to. And so I think he had, some shame around it as a youngster. And it wasn't until coming back from Korea and really like connecting with the Korean population that he had something really in common with immigrant populations. He talks a lot about that with Japanese workers that he worked in the fields with when he was picking fruit in school. And I think he sort of came to terms with it and really longed to get to his roots and find out where he came from. And he asked his dad when he got back from Korea, like, where do I go? Like, who do I look up? Like, who do I call? And his dad said, you look up the Blackhorse family. And that's what my dad did. And he just found his people. He kind of found his home finally.
Yeah, wonderful story. Shannon, let's hear part of an earlier interview with Rick West, the founding director of the Smithsonian Institute's National Museum of the American Indian and a Cheyenne and Arapaho citizen. West told me that he often thinks of your father's achievements in two ways, one beginning with his position as the peace chief of his tribe.
That's a very specific cultural role that one takes on in being asked to occupy that kind of position. And the obligations are twofold. One is that you act in a way which brings peace to the community, and that's an inward-looking thing, if you will. And that is our responsibility. But it also leads to the second thing that I would like to say about Ben, and that is that he was a profoundly effective boundary walker, in my view. In other words, he was anchored in and came from the Cheyenne community. And yet he took on the task of having an interface at the boundary between us as a Native community and as Cheyenne people and those outside of our own community. And he did that in a couple of different ways. One is that he was a talented artist, which is how I came to know him. But at the same time, Ben acted at other boundaries, if you will, between our community and elsewhere. And that was the political work that he did. His role as a congressman and as a senator, always acting on behalf of the Native community and having an interface, if you will, with communities beyond us, which were not always friendly, but which he worked with in order to try to achieve any number of important things. And of course, in my case, the most relevant, immediate such example is his role in the establishment of the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of the American Indian.
He authored that legislation in 1989. Tell me more about what that period was like when that legislation was crafted and his overall contributions to the museum's creation.
Well, it was an interesting combination because you may recall that there are two parts to the authorizing legislation for the National Museum of the American Indian. One was the establishment of the museum itself, this symbolic centerpiece that would be at the very head of the National Mall in Washington, D.C. But it also, even before NAGPRA, was the originating legislation on the subject of repatriation. And Ben operated in both spaces. The National Museum of the American Indian is a living institution. It oversees, if you will, a very important sector of culture with respect to living communities. And I think that was at the very center of Ben's own thinking, that in order to make an institution like the National Museum of the American Indian effective and truly responsive to its indigenous community, if you will, that is what had to happen. There had to be a rebalancing act that occurred between museums as colonial institutions and the National Museum of the American Indian, which was to be a museum of living cultures, if you will, of the indigenous peoples, quite frankly, not just of the United States, but of this entire hemisphere.
That was an interview with founding director of the National Museum of the American Indian, Rick West. And Shannon, I'd like for you to comment on this and tell me, what did your father say about his work to get Congress to embrace legislation that benefited Native American people?
Well, I love hearing Rick talk about it. He speaks about the museum and Dad's involvement in it so perfectly and eloquently. And it was just like he said, the bill got passed in, 1989, but to get the museum actually built and get the funding in place was a whole other battle. And I would say that really that museum is the thing that my dad is the most proud of and was always the most proud of his accomplishments in the political world and for Native people.
Now, we talked earlier with Suzanne Hardrow about some of the legislation your father offered, and this is interesting. He said gaming would slowly erode tribal culture. Did he talk to you much about his philosophy on national policy and its impact on Native people?
Can you be more specific? Are you talking about as far as Indian gaming goes?
Indian gaming and other issues as well, yes.
I mean, I think just kind of an overarching comment is just that he very much believed in advocating for Native people and all of the injustices that have happened. And he was, very committed to rewriting history accurately. And we see it in so much of the work that he accomplished from the Sand Creek Massacre to getting the Museum of American Indian in place. I think he had a strong commitment to telling the truth and setting the record straight.
And Shannon, now reflecting today, how do you want people to remember your father?
Dad had so many different areas of accomplishment in his life, whether it was being an artist or being in politics or being in the Olympics or, being in the military. It's kind of like whoever you talk to that interfaced with my dad in these different sections of his life, that's what he's remembered for. I mean, I can just speak from my perspective of, one of his final days with us together a few days before he passed. He had, what they say is like that surge before somebody dies or crosses over, and they are really, really aware and present. And he was telling me that, like, the best father he ever came in contact with was my mom's dad. And I said, you are the best father I've ever come in contact with.
Oh, that's beautiful, Shannon. I want to also ask you about your father when he switched to the Republican Party, and that created a lot of headlines. He was heavily criticized by the Democratic Party. Did you have a heads up that he was going to do that? No. And was he any more effective, do you think, in your view, after he made that move?
Yeah, I love that you asked that, because I've always been in the art business, selling art and running galleries. And so I've always been on the side of my dad's art career. And I found out just minutes before he went public about it that he was switching parties. And the response was extreme. People were, happy and mad, and there was a strong reaction. We had people coming in the gallery wanting to return his jewelry that had bought it before, and but I feel like he was more effective once he had switched parties. He was more aligned with the way the Republicans were voting, and as you see, he got overwhelming support.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Shannon, really appreciate you coming on the show today, and also Suzanne Schoenhardt-Joe for educating our listeners and enlightening us and sharing the legacy of your father, Ben Nighthorse Campbell. Listeners, if you'd like to comment on this show, go to our Facebook page, go to our Instagram page, or go to our website, nativeamericacalling.com. Share your memories, share your thoughts with regard to either Ben Nighthorse Campbell or Harvey Pratt. And let's now talk more about Harvey Pratt. And to do that, we're going to talk with his wife, Gina Posey Pratt. She joins us now from El Reno, Oklahoma. And Gina, your husband's career, multifaceted. He was a Cheyenne peace chief. He was a veteran. He worked in law enforcement. Of course, we talked earlier about how he designed the National Native American Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. And he was also a Bigfoot expert. He was active in all of these areas. What motivated your husband with such a wide range of skills and pursuits?
I would say what motivated him most was his upbringing. He went to St. Patrick's Indian Mission in Anadarko, and unlike a lot of Native people, he had a positive experience there. He said it changed his life, and he had a good experience there. And the same thing with the military. He went to the military, and he said it changed his life as well. He thought he was on a path where he could have went one way or went the other, and he went into the military, and it was a positive thing for him. And when he got out of the military, he went into law enforcement, and he thinks that he said that he felt that he went from one brotherhood to another. He was in the military, that was a brotherhood, and he stepped right into law enforcement, that was another brotherhood, and it's why he felt he had such a smooth transition. I think that those laid a good foundation for him to bring out all the aspects of his creativity. Everything he did was creative. A good example, even in our home, we were spackling our home, and he was spackling images into the walls that we painted over. He just couldn't help himself. And everything he did, everything he touched, he was just everywhere, his artwork. He just couldn't help it. He could not stop the creativity in his mind. Even in the hospital, when he was in the hospital, he was still thinking of inventions and things he could do to make better. And he could, what if we did this? What if we did that? I would also say about Harvey that his life was very much about service. It was service to the tribal people. It was service to veterans, service to law enforcement, and service to artists in the art community. He very much is about service. Even up until his final days when we haven't had him at home, he was still signing a petition to help someone with the tribe. And just a day before he passed. So even then he was trying to help people, even though he was, not feeling well and, coming to the end of his life, he was still trying to help people. That was just him.
Mm-hmm. Now, Gina, you also had a lengthy career in law enforcement, and later you managed Harvey's artwork. What was a memorable moment for you in terms of just collaborating with your husband professionally?
The most memorable moment would be the National Native American Veterans Memorial. We collaborated on that with our son, Harvey's youngest son, Nathan. We had the time of our life. It just came together so beautifully. A group of people came together, and it just worked as it should have worked. We were worried about the memorial. We wanted it to heal people and to bring people together to honor their veterans. And when we had the opening of the memorial, I remember I was crying because I saw people going in and they were using it as we hoped they would. They were going in and doing their ceremonies and saying prayers for their veterans, active veterans or veterans who had gone on. But just being a part of that, bringing it all together, planning it together, the trips to Washington, the people we met, we had the time of our lives, and we were just so proud of it.
Thank you, Gina. In 2018, the National Museum of Veterans Memorial selected Harvey Pratt, artist, Vietnam veteran, and citizen of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma, to design the National Memorial. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back, and we will talk more with people who knew Harvey Pratt and also were related to Harvey Pratt. We'll be talking with his son, Nathan Pratt. So stay with us, listeners, and if you'd like to comment on this show, go to our social media, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, or Threads, or our website, nativeamericacalling.com.
Tribal Development Partners, helping tribes build toward their goals through 105L leasing and essential facility development, empowering sovereignty, strengthening community. More at tribaldevpartners.com, proud supporters of this show.
Need help identifying community priorities? Kaufman & Associates' approach to evaluation is rooted in Indigenous knowledge, honoring tribal history, and sovereignty. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
You are listening to Native America Calling. We're talking about the life and legacy of Cheyenne and Arapaho citizen Harvey Pratt. Leave a comment about this show on our website and social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. Let's talk now with the son of Harvey Pratt, Nathan Pratt. He joins us from El Reno, Oklahoma. And Nathan, we have been speaking a lot about your father's career, but what was he like personally and as a father?
I am so thankful you asked me that question. That is what I was hoping to address. The last few days, the tributes have been pouring in. We've been at the funeral home receiving tributes and people pouring in through the front doors, telling stories about my dad. And there is one theme that has been repeated time and time again from law enforcement officials, people he grew up with, friends and family, and it was my dad's humility. He was such an accomplished man, but the people who walk through the doors and the people who call me and text me and email me, of course they acknowledge his career, but with tears in their eyes, what they're telling me is, your dad was so kind to me. He mentored me. He took me to lunch. He welcomed me when I joined the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. My dad was such a humble man. He was the same man in public as a public servant as he was behind closed doors when we were making breakfast together or when we were lifting weights together, or he was coaching my little league team. He was a humble man.
It sounds like it, Nathan. Now, what's also interesting, you, like your father, are an accomplished artist. Did he give you any advice with regard to how to approach your artwork?
Well, he did. He modeled it. I grew up at art shows, Red Earth, Arts Festival, small gallery shows. Watching him interact was an education. My dad had such a natural smile. He had such a peaceful presence. people loved to be around him. Little kids, little babies, they would laugh. Interns, young artists, older artists, they would just gravitate towards his booth. And from an early age and on through my teens and 20s and 30s and now 40s, I have watched his grace and his easy way of interacting with people. And over the years, watching him on television and giving radio interviews and being a guest on podcasts, I always wondered how he performed so effortlessly. He didn't go to broadcast school. He didn't get a journalism degree. He was just naturally gifted. And so he set such a high bar, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make him proud and striving to be a fraction of the man that he was.
Your father was a guest on our show a number of times. I interviewed him more than once. He was always so gracious and, like you said, just so articulate and just such a beautiful speaker, articulated so well. Nathan, do you have any memories or just any information about your father that nobody else knows? Maybe a humorous anecdote or a little story you could share?
Well, yes. Several years ago, we were alone cooking breakfast, and he was flipping bacon in the skillet, and it was early, and we were talking about sleep and getting good rest. And he told me about his policy with his cell phone. And I think I posed the question, what he does with his phone at night. And really, without even thinking, it was just a passing comment, but it is emblazoned in my memory. He said, I never turn off my phone. And this is toward the end of his career and maybe even in retirement, which was never really a retirement because he was busier in his retirement from law enforcement than he ever was. But I don't think the average person thinks twice about turning off their cell phone, putting it on silent or do not disturb when they go to bed. My dad wasn't looking for any sort of credit. He just very casually said, oh, I never turn off my phone. I want to be available for someone if they need me. And that, I believe, is a glimpse into his soul. He lived a life of service and sacrifice. He didn't prioritize himself. Most people prize their sleep more than anything, but he kept his phone by his bed and he left the ringer on loud because he wanted to be available for someone if they needed him.
I love that story. And I can envision you talking with your dad, the bacon frying in the skillet. That sounds like Oklahoma to me, Nathan. I've been there a few times. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk now with Dee Cordry. He is a colleague of Harvey Pratt, and he's a former Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation agent. And Dee, you and Harvey worked together for many years at OSBI, and you worked on some serious crimes, some big cases. Was there a particular case that left an impact on both of you?
Well, a lot of agents or retired agents don't really want to talk about their cases for various reasons. And I kind of feel the same way, but I'll say that I had a homicide case one time that involved finding a skull, a homicide victim. And so I went to Harvey, and he applied those forensic artistic skills and helped to reconstruct a face to go with that. But see, he did that almost every day. But I would like to point out that his forensic artistic skills were very important. But it's also important to realize that from the 1970s through the 1990s, Harvey was an OSBI agent and a supervisor in various positions within the investigative division. And the forensic art was a part-time job for him within the agency. There's the quite famous homicide case where 3 little girls were murdered. And the suspect in that case was a fugitive. And the OSBI put everything they had into tracking him down. And Harvey was part of that team of agents that found him and captured him. And it was a big achievement and quite noteworthy for the agency, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. And I really liked the fact that when Harvey became an agent in the 1970s, well, some of the agents that he was working with had been there since the 1960s. And so these were some of the older guys that from an entirely different generation. And I got to meet a few of them. Harvey introduced me to a few of them. We would have a cup of coffee, but that was pretty special for me. Like I say, Harvey was my boss off and on for almost my entire career.
And Dee, in addition to being an agent, what were some other roles that Harvey had at OSBI?
Well, he had these various supervisory positions. And when he retired, he was an assistant director over the investigative division. And then he had the 20 years of service, which enabled him to retire if he wanted to. But state officials and OSBI officials felt like they needed him to remain. And so the legislature created an official position with the title of forensic artist. And so Harvey remained with the agency for a long, long time. And then that was when that was his full-time job. And he developed special techniques. He had learned how to do a facial reconstruction in three-dimensional using clay in a very scientific process. But he also developed his own techniques to do a similar thing in 2 dimensions with a sketch, a drawing. Now, I had the opportunity one time to personally observe him interviewing a witness. And ordinarily, when an investigator is conducting an interview like this, you don't want additional people in the room, but I was allowed to, on this occasion, as an observer. And I got to see how meticulous his process was to gain that person's trust. See, when you're dealing with a witness or a victim, in his situation, you're trying to get that person to go someplace they do not want to go. They don't want to think about that again. They don't, but in order to try to identify that suspect, the law enforcement officer needs to try to deal with that person. And that was one of Harvey's biggest strengths in law enforcement. And in this day and age, we would use the term people person. And even that description kind of trivializes it a little bit. But anyway, Harvey knew everybody in law enforcement. because he had been an OSBI agent and a forensic artist for so many years. And everybody, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but everybody in Oklahoma law enforcement knew Harvey Pratt. And so for me,
Dee, thank you so much for sharing these memories. Really appreciate you joining the show. Let's hear a final excerpt from Rick West, speaking about both men, Harvey Pratt and Ben Nighthorse Campbell.
I think I would like Native people to remember both of them on these two bases. They were Cheyenne, they're sisters, they knew where they came from, and they honored that every day of their lives. But they took the gift that had been given to them to be sisters and a part of our community, and they carried that forward wherever they were. And if you look at both men, they were in very diverse places, professionally and personally, throughout their lives. And so that is what I meant when earlier I referred to the fact that they were boundary walkers of great strength. In other words, they were emboldened and made powerful by knowing from whence they came. But they used that power, if you will, at the boundary between our community and others to advance the interests into the future of our communities.
That was Rick West, once again speaking on the legacies of these two men, Harvey Pratt and Ben Nighthorse Campbell. Suzanne Schoen-Harjo, we've got a couple of minutes before we have to wrap up the show. I'm going to give you the last word. Anything else you would like to share about either of these legacies today?
Well, I would like to first convey my deepest condolences and respect to all of their relatives who have spoken on this program and who may be listening and who were in their circles. They both were extraordinary people, and their legacy is looms large on the horizon, both behind us and in front of us. I think that their lasting legacies, as has been mentioned before, are in the National Museum of the American Indian on the Capitol Mall as we envisioned it in 1967 at Bear Butte, as facing east and look right by the Capitol, and so that the people in the policy positions in the U.S. Capitol would have to look us in the face whenever they made laws about us or anything affecting our lives. And what those policymakers can go to the cafeteria in the National Museum of the American Indian, which is one of the most terrific places on the Hill to eat, and they get caught up in things that Harvey Pratt envisioned, that Ben Nighthorse Campbell envisioned, that they worked so hard with so many other veterans and other Native peoples to manifest in the overall museum and in that magnificent spiritual structure of the tribute to the veterans.
Suzanne, thank you so much. Everyone who joined this show today, Suzanne Harjo, Rick West, Shannon Campbell, Gina Posey Pratt, Nathan Pratt, and Dee Cordry. We're out of time. We're going to have to wrap it up. But please, listeners, don't forget, you can join us again tomorrow for a look at Native voting rights during the coming election year. I'm Sean Spruce. You've been listening to the one, the only Native America Calling.
Who protects Indian country? Amerind does. As the only 100% tribally owned insurance carrier, Amerind helps strengthen tribal communities by providing reliable insurance coverage and keeping dollars in Indian country. From property and liability to commercial auto and tribal workers' compensation, Amerind is here to protect what matters. Celebrating 40 years of serving Indian country. Learn more at Amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com. Repatriation is the return of ancestors and stolen culture. The Association on American Indian Affairs is hosting the 11th annual Repatriation Conference, Feeding the Fire, Advancing the Movement, in February 2026. This fully virtual conference will offer small group interactive workshops, strategies, networking, and more to advance domestic and international repatriation. More at Indian-Affairs.org. The association supports this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.